we'd like to open the public hearing. We'll now receive the presentation from the demographer, Deborah Diep. Thank you, Deborah.
Hello again, everybody, and tell me if my voice should carry, but hopefully the. So just a reminder that we're undertaking this process because the district received a letter that alleged that voting dilution and racially polarized voting were occurring in the district due to the at-large system for the board of directors, and the district opted to enter the safe harbor process, which was allowed by law, to take the time to determine what steps they were going to take to address the issues that were raised in the letter. So really, this is where we're at, is we're in this 90-day period called the safe harbor process. For the timeline, it's basically what have we done and what are we doing next? The district received the letter in March 2018. The board announced this and started collecting comments on the process in April and will continue to do so throughout the entire districting process. On May 8, the board adopted a resolution that entered it into this safe harbor process, which provides 90 days for the board to consider their options. And those, generally speaking, are to do nothing, to change to division elections, or to consider other remedies to ameliorate the voting dilution. But really, the letter demands that the district adopt a by-division plan for its election. So in that sense, you're a little constrained in how you can respond to that letter. Through the safe harbor process, at least 5 public hearings are required to be held. And on May 31st, there was the first of 5 scheduled public hearings, which was held jointly with the board and the CAC. On June 6th, the second public hearing was held by the CAC. The deadline to submit proposed maps was June 8. All of the proposed maps were posted online on June 13th, and then we are currently holding the 3rd public hearing, and the 4th and 5th public hearings will be held in July. So per the safe harbor process, the first 2 public hearings are to be held to provide an overview of the process and discuss the criteria, but no maps are to be discussed. These were held on May 31 and June 6. Today is the 3rd public hearing, and there are 2 primary topics on the agenda: proposed maps and the sequencing of elections. So this is the first time we will see any draft maps, and we're going to go over these in detail and have a discussion on the maps submitted and the proposed sequencing of elections. I will insert here again, too, that the committee is going to work with the maps that were submitted, and so no new wholesale maps are going to be created or submitted or worked with. We have to start with those maps, and we don't just get to start accepting wholesale new maps. So again, from this point on, we're going to deal with revisions and modifications to the maps that were submitted, no new maps. At the next public hearing number 4, the CAC will review all of the maps and any modifications to the maps that we either have or come up with today. And then the CAC will hopefully have a consensus to provide a recommendation of 1 or more maps for the board to consider. The final public hearing will be held by the board in July. And at that meeting, the board will consider any recommendations from the CAC and will select the final map to be implemented in the 2020 election and finalizing the sequence for future elections. So what do we do now? This is the first time we have any draft maps to consider, and we will review and discuss the proposed sequencing and submitted maps. We're going to go over standardized maps of each of the proposals, which include detailed boundary descriptions, and those were posted online and are included in your packets. The submitted maps and tables with demographic information were posted online and were also provided with the original submissions as well, so folks can look at what was submitted versus the standardized maps. The packets contain the corresponding data tables for each of the proposals that show the detailed population shares and the racial and ethnic distribution for each proposed director division. And so we're going to talk about and look at how to prioritize the maps and see if any are not viable. For example, if there are any that have a population spread above 10%, these would not be viable as they currently stand. And we will have a discussion on how to prioritize consideration of criteria when the divisions do not equal the ideal target population. The group will also consider any revisions to maps, if you would like to have those be done, to be considered at public hearing number 4. So the first item today to cover is the proposed sequencing of elections for the 5 director divisions. If adopted, the new divisions would take effect for the 2020 election cycle, and it is proposed that the sequencing coincide with the existing staggered terms of the board members. So we'd have 2 divisions that would be up for election in 2020, and 3 would be up for election in 2022. Even though I'm sitting behind you, it just makes it a little easier for me to control things. If you have any questions, feel free to. So all 6 plans that were submitted by the public, and all have 5 contiguous divisions. 5 were drawn using the block group boundaries, and 1, Plan E, was drawn using both block and block group boundaries. 4 have population spreads under 10%, and 2 have spreads above 10%, Plans D and E. This would mean that in their current state, Plans D and E are not viable, and we'd have 4 viable plans as currently submitted. But having already had the request from a committee member to be able to do live changes at this meeting with the Excel file if the CAC wanted to amend plans, and seeing that Plan E was so very close to the 10% threshold, whereas Plan D was far from the threshold at 33.11% spread, and then recognizing the compressed timeline that the district has to work under through the safe harbor process. And again, to be as most efficient and productive during the process, CDR was directed to amend Plan E in order to make it a viable plan in preparation for presentation at today's public hearing. So we actually have a revision 1 to Plan E that was put forth, and it's, again, also an example that you can look at to see how revisions can be made. So for the submitted maps, Plan A has 5 contiguous divisions with a spread of 8.34%. This plan used block group boundaries to create the divisions. Plan B has 5 contiguous divisions with a spread of 5% and also used block group boundaries. Plan C has 5 contiguous divisions with a spread of 3.28% and used block group boundaries. Plan D has 5 contiguous divisions with a spread of 33.11% and used block group boundaries, but this is not a viable plan at the 33%. Plan E has 5 contiguous divisions with a spread of 12.58%. Plan E was submitted, and some of the lines didn't follow the block group boundaries, so instead the standardized map uses block boundaries, and as was estimated to be as closely as the submitted plan that was possible that we did. Plan F has 5 contiguous divisions with a spread of 4.12% and used block group boundaries. And the revision to Plan E to make it a viable plan has 5 contiguous divisions with a spread of 3.55%, and again use the block group boundaries as did the original Plan E. So not that you can read it necessarily, but again, just that we have it, and it's also available online in your packets. We're going to quickly go over the plan tables for each of the detail tables for each of the plans. So Plan A, spread of 8.34% with 2 divisions above the target population and 3 below. Plan B, 5% spread with 3 divisions above the target and 2 below. C has a spread of 3.28% with 2 divisions above the target and 3 below. Plan D, again, with a 33% spread, 2 divisions above the target and 3 below. Again, not a viable plan. The largest division was 19% above the ideal population. The smallest was about 14% below. Plan E has a spread of 12.58% with 3 divisions above the target and 2. Plan F has a spread of 4.12% with 1 division above the target and 4 below. And then Plan E's revision 1 has a spread of 3.55% with 3 divisions above and 2 below. So what we want to do now is talk about the proposed maps and see if we can start to prioritize them and how to do that. And in order to do that, we again have to go back to the redistricting criteria and start with, first and foremost, the director divisions shall be nearly equal in population, and the plans have to have a spread under 10%. And then you have the additional factors that are used to explain any deviations from the target population: topography, geography. Divisions should be contiguous and compact, and taking a look at communities of interest. So when we're looking at the criteria, you're looking for things like natural or built features, freeways, major roads, rivers, hills, and mountains. You can take invisible boundaries such as cities, neighborhoods, special districts, school districts. You can have special zones or sub-areas, an entertainment zone, a downtown, a college area, or historic area. And then you can also consider areas with similar or common interests or shared issues, socioeconomic characteristics. So this could be legislative interests, political, education, or housing. And one of the ways to do that is one of the handouts that was provided to you. I love a spreadsheet. So if I'm going to do something like this, I want to somehow see if there is a way to prioritize the maps in at least an attempt at some sort of objective way. With the criteria being, some of the criteria being subjective, you really have to try and organize your thoughts. So this is one way to do it. It's a suggestion, but it's to start the discussion and get the juices flowing and get you thinking about it. So for example, the simplest one and the one that's included in the first line on your table is, what's the difference with the target or ideal population? How big is the percent spread? So you want a lower percent spread is better. So if this percent spread is between 0 and 1.9%, they get a score of 5. If the spread is between 8 and 10%, they get the low score of 1. So again, in your handout, it'll show that Plan A has a score of 1 because it has a spread of 8.34%. Plan B is 5%, so it was a score of 3, and so forth. Now, again, this is for discussion. This isn't necessarily a voting, and I'm not saying this, you have to come up with these numbers, and then whatever gets the highest or the lowest score, you throw out or you take it. Again, this is just how to think about things. So, item number 2, geography. How well do division boundaries follow physical or easy to identify features? Do they follow things like freeways or major roads, rivers, hills, or mountains? If you think the plan does very well, you give it a score of 5. If you think it does a good job, if it addresses it well, you give it a score of 4. If you think it did a really poor job, you give it a score of 5. Or excuse me, 1. With 3, item number 3, compactness. You look at how many divisions are relatively compact. And this has to be taken with a grain of salt because you have to consider multiple things. First and foremost, you want to equalize the population, but the population isn't uniformly distributed throughout the district. And so some of the divisions will be larger. So when you're looking at it, it is kind of just in the eye of the beholder. You look at it, do they look compact? Are some of them yes or no? We all have seen, I think I have it here. So, for example, this is the population density map. This block group over here, even though it's probably the second largest in the whole district, it only has a population of 2. So whatever division this goes in, it's just going to be larger because it only adds 2, which is negligible. So when you're looking at that thing called compactness, it's taking into consideration just how well do those division boundaries seem to group population together. For communities of interest, there's a wide variety. So you're looking at and you're thinking of what's important to you. How well are communities of interest that are a priority to you grouped together? If you think that they're grouped together very well, then they get a higher score. If you think communities of interest that are important to you are divided, they would get a lower score. So we'll go into, this is an example, again, too, because it also goes back to the letter. This is the Hispanic CDOT population for distribution throughout the district, over with Plan A as an overlay. So we can see that the larger concentrations of Hispanics and Latinos were grouped together in Division 3 and into Division 4. In Plan B, Division 4 seems to group the highest concentrations together into one division. Plan C has, it looks like it's an identical, even though the numbers are different, has the same boundaries for Divisions 4 and 5 in Plans B and C. Plan E has the concentrations into both Division 3 and 4. Plan F has the concentrations in both 5 and 1. And then Plan E also, mostly in 4, but also in Division 3. So something that was also brought up, it was in your original packets as well, but there was a request So even though this was showing percent share, these are the actual numbers of Latino voter turnout. This, again, another community of interest that can be considered. You have non-Hispanic Asians. So again, even though they're almost uniformly distributed as a percent share of the total of the block group population, there are some higher concentrations in the north part of the district. And then also owner occupancy. This was one of those items that was included in the data table in your first packet, and we added the map as well. So higher, ones in blue and what turns out looking like a purple color, those have higher shares of owner occupied units. And then the other items that were brought up and requested at past hearings that were also published online were the pump station. So we have the pump station map 1 and pump station map 2. So those are the proposals. I hope that folks at least got a chance to look at them before the meeting as well, to just kind of digest them. But now it's talking about the maps, talking amongst yourselves. I can facilitate. You have your worksheets. But really the goal is to figure out, to see if we can narrow the plans. Things, for example, like Plan D. For the spread of 33.1%, really not a viable plan. There would be a lot of changes that would have to be made to make it a viable plan. And you already have 5 others, in a sense, viable plans with that. So in that sense, Plan D would be considered a non-viable plan. And the rest of it, you have the percentage spreads. My guess is that that's not going to be the only consideration that you have. But the worksheets are something now as a discussion, you can make notes as we go. It can also be something that we assign as homework and have you go back and think about it and bring it back to the next meeting. Or we could also set a deadline for a couple of weeks, send back your notes or your comments, and maybe we can do some sort of tally, anonymous of course, but that we could say, oh, this out of folks submitted feedback on each of the plans, and these 2 or 3 rows to the top, it's up to you really, but again, we're here to discuss the maps, and so I'm just going to open the floor to have you guys provide comments or amongst yourselves, discussion, or ask any questions that you have.
I have a question. Yeah. In regards to the pump station map, what's the significance of the pump stations and why we would want them maybe more concentrated or more distributed throughout the 5 districts? Does anybody know?
I think I can answer that. I think it was more of wanting to know where they are to see if they were evenly spaced throughout the district. It was just another piece of information so someone could look, anyone could look at it to see if they are spread out equally, if there's a significance in having more than, more pump stations in one district than the other. But as our general manager pointed out, they don't really have control. The district board members don't really have control over those. Those are more dictated by services that you provide and the agencies we contract with and how stuff leaves the area, as opposed to, I want these pump stations here. That's where they have to go. Yeah.
Right, they may represent areas of ratepayers, but not necessarily voters.
I have a question. Once our committee goes through and determines that we have a recommendation on what the districts should be, is there going to be a situation where the board could say, we don't like that, and we came up with our own map?
No, in the sense of let me answer that in 2 parts. The first is this committee's making a recommendation to the board. The board can accept or choose another action. But there really shouldn't, before their final meeting on what is expected to be July 26th, any maps have to be proposed by this committee, revisions to the maps, by your 4th public hearing so they can be posted by the next day. So there's no new maps that would be considered that you wouldn't see or have a hand in making revisions to at that time, because the process is we have the submitted maps that were submitted by the deadline, and we're only making revisions to those maps. And in the sense, creating a whole new map, saying I'm revising, say, Plan A, and coming up with something totally different, that's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be modifications, minor modifications in a sense, to an existing map.
Okay, you explained that to us, and I apologize for making you repeat it. But the reason I did it, I'd like to explain, is the city of Costa Mesa just went to districts, and they went through this whole process where they had a committee to design those districts. And then at the last minute, against staff recommendation, against committee recommendation, a council member drew up a map at the last minute, dropped it in, they voted on it, it passed, and that's what went on the ballot. So I don't want to imply that this district acts in that manner. I just wanted to clarify that you don't. So thank you.
Would it be fair to say that it will be one of the maps that you discuss and review? They may or may not adopt the one you recommend.
Right.
But it won't be a new one they create out of whole cloth that you've never seen before.
Perfect.
Yes.
And we're hoping that if there are any revisions, because of the compressed timeline, that they would be proposed tonight instead of having I'm not saying it's possible to have revisions after the public hearing number 4, but you're not really going to have a lot of time to discuss it. So if there's any further revisions that folks want, we really should be discussing them tonight, even if you don't have a map to look at. But if you provide direction on those, which we can work with tonight, that's what we're looking for.
I had a question. Just as I was working on my plan, as far as, and actually it wasn't mentioned here, but I saw one of the public comment cards was from Wendy Weiss mentioning concerns about gerrymandering. And I know there's packing and cracking, and I just wanted to clarify, because in theory we're going to set the district for 5 board members, is it optimal to have a Latino majority in one of them, so that then in theory they get, and again it assumes they might be voting purely for, racial reasons, but so that they are as best represented as possible, is it optimal that they have a majority in one of the districts? How do we navigate that?
So there's Montenegro, I would let.
Well, that's one of the factors you can consider in list of factors. That is one of them, and that's obviously why the lawsuit was brought.
Right.
But your job, the duties are create districts and make them equal, and that's one of the factors you want to consider. Is that would be fair to that group, and the fact that certainly the courts would look at your decision and if they thought the percentages were wrong or something was wrong about it, they would consider it. But they were trying to do this, and they say that was a legitimate purpose. And might get you some points with a court reviewing it, I guess.
And then let me add that race is not supposed to be the only factor. And it's supposed to be, in a sense, a proxy for their shared interests. So you're not trying to create divisions just because it's one racial group or another, or not like that. But again, when you've been accused of voting dilution, to divide those areas are not necessarily, it shouldn't be high on the priority list. But again, since the first and foremost goal, number one goal, is to have divisions with as nearly equal population as possible, you have to explain any deviation of why it's not 0 or ish.
And if it wasn't clear or unsaid, maybe state it in the reverse. If you were to draw the divisions to try and eliminate further that group's population, that was your purpose. I think that would be, we may be vulnerable to that kind of thing.
Okay, well, I have a suggestion to start, if no one minds. I was looking at Plan C. And what I liked about Plan C is that the overall percentage spread is low. It's 3.28. And out of the 5 districts, when looking at total population versus population over 18 years and older versus citizen voting age population, there is one district, District 5, that has a citizen voting population of, in the majority for the Hispanic and Latino community of 56.6% over non-Hispanic white at 40.2%. Now, if you look at the other 4 divisions in this proposed mapping, you'll see that the Hispanic or Latino percentage in the other 4 divisions is significantly lower, which really does give the Hispanic community in this instance in Division 5 the majority of vote. So if they were all to select the same candidate, it would be safe to say that that candidate would be elected. And I think that that is important in terms of why this whole thing came about. I like the idea of districts, but for me, this proposed map was the strongest of the ones that were submitted in their current form without any edits. That being one of the biggest reasons. Now, the one concern I do have, and I did take into consideration, is that when you look at the total population versus the population of people that are 18 years and over and the citizen voting age, which I think that's the strongest one that was explained to us that we should be considering. These numbers are based on census numbers, and a census is done once every 10 years. So if we're looking at a total population that is significantly higher with people under the age of 18, that could have changed in 10 years and be significantly higher in actuality, because we don't have the numbers that would reflect that each year to be completely accurate. So based on the numbers we have, I liked this map. The only change I would recommend, and I think at looking at all the maps, I know this happened to me. My district number 1 just happened to be the box that I plugged into the spreadsheet first, which was a great spreadsheet, by the way. It made this a lot easier than it would have been without it. I just think that when we get to our final mapping, I would like to see us either start at the north or the south and make our district numbers flow a little better, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, and then you jump across to the other side and you have 4 and 5 is in the middle. But again, it's probably just the way you plugged it in on the spreadsheet. I just think that it could flow a little different and be a little smoother. But I liked this map. I thought it was the best one.
I agree. I like Plan C. I also couldn't help but notice that Plan B is quite similar to Plan C. That's not to say that they're the only viable plans. We know that there's 4 viable plans and a revised viable plan. I found it helpful when the demographer toggled through the slides. I don't want to speak for the rest of the committee, but can we take a moment maybe and just look at the viable plans, because then it kind of helps with some of the geographical and invisible guidelines.
We can reorder too if it's easier to say, for example, see Plan E versus Plan E revised, something like that. So Plan A. Again, the Plan E's, because they use the block boundaries instead of the block group, they're not as smooth, if you will, as the other ones. And while we're doing this, I will also add that the numbering of the actual districts may change in the end, and it may change to coincide with odds and evens to reflect the staggered elections of where the existing board members, who goes off next. So I personally, I find it easier if it's odds and evens grouping together, but you guys can make any decision you want. But if it's possible and you want to provide input on the numbering, for example, this one starts with in the south and then goes up to the north, and looks almost like it goes in a counterclockwise motion for the numbering. Are there any plans that you want to see next to each other? Or should we pull out Plan D?
Plan D, the one that had the wide spread.
Yeah.
I think that should be pulled out.
Yeah, it was a
Would we need to make a motion if we wanted to just remove one of the
Disregard.
plans?
You don't need to take that kind of action. It can just be more of a, we'll do that.
Right.
Well, she's pulling that up. Another note I would make is that Plan E, even as it's revised, it does have the most irregular shapes. Unless there was some other quality to it that made it the most viable plan, it may be one that we would want to put on the back burner as well, just because I think to the voters, the eye test, it's just, it looks irregular.
Right, it would make it easier to pull out Plan D, shelf F for the time being.
So plan, again, for Plan E, original, with the percent spread, this is one that, as it currently stands, wouldn't be viable. And somebody asked for, which plans did we see next to each other? B and C. So B and C, toggling backwards between B and C. You can see that even though Plan B4 and Plan C5, they're actually the same divisions, they're just numbers.
One note I would make is that as you get geographically towards the center of the city, the guidance becomes more difficult, in my opinion. There's mixed owner-occupied and rental, as well as mixed commercial and residential. And it is our job to, I guess, split hairs and come up with it. But I think to a certain extent, that's just going to have to be the best, option. Because, you look at the difference of one on that, and then what number is it on C? 2, I guess you'd call it the most similar. And there's just, I think both individuals that submitted it did their best to come up with some assumptions, but there's probably no right or wrong definitive way.
In regards to owner occupied, I know that was here. Well, it probably was requested too. But is anyone taking that in consideration? And if they do, why are you going one way or another based on an owner occupied chart? Does anybody?
I'd like to address that.
Okay, great.
When I was going through the existing conditions, I was shocked that for total housing units, 60% are renter occupied. I did not know that. 40% are owner occupied, which is actually different than single family versus multifamily housing units. There's 51% multifamily and 48.9% single family housing. So conceivably, people are renting single family housing units. So anyway, it was just of interest to me, and also Mr. Mosier had brought it up at a previous hearing about the idea that even though the sewer would be managed by the Costa Mesa Sanitary District for everyone, the materials pickup is only for owners are paying the property taxes for that. So just that it's a consideration. So, and to Andrew's point about at some point it does feel like you're splitting hairs, but I was trying in my map to keep that they might be areas where they might have like interest, try to use it as a proxy just to think about if this is a neighborhood where more people are renting, maybe they should be together kind of thing. But
Gotcha.
but just also to give that thought. But since everyone does still need sewer service, everyone should care. But I was just trying to give that some thought as well.
Give them voice, right?
Yeah.
So on that note, I think the C reflects that. It kind of tries to group the, like on the top half, the middle part that was different.
Owner occupied?
Yeah, right? With the,
Yes, that's
yeah. So
To the mic, to the mic.
where it dips down on the right, sorry. The number, section 2 on C, where it seems to try to keep intact the larger owner-occupied blue section up, right? My question was, that's like where the grounds are, and I didn't know if there were that whole area below that associated with the fairgrounds, and I didn't know if they had. I didn't know if there was any shared
On this-
interest, right?
Plan C, the fairgrounds would be in one.
Yeah.
Right.
So it would split kind of where that area would be, but for the services, which are really clearly it gives voice to the owners. Number 1 section. And then number 2 is large. It's kind of like half, right? It's kind of split, half or less. Yeah.
I didn't look at that at all. I don't care if it's a renter or an owner. Everybody needs the same service, and in my opinion, if they live in the city or they live in the Costa Mesa Sanitary District, they should have equal opportunity for equal representation and equal service. So I'm not taking any of that into consideration in terms as to why I like this map, because it really doesn't matter to me. And what's interesting is a lot of owners own multiple properties in the city, and so a lot of the rental properties belong to people who already own and live in the city. But again, I don't care about that.
Owner occupied, right? Right.
Sorry, can we talk B and C?
Sure.
As we're all looking at, is there on either of the plans? Does anyone feel like there's a community of interest or a cohesiveness that's definitely being divided? I mean, I'm not seeing any obvious one, but I'm just curious what the rest of the community thinks.
What was that?
If there's any like obvious cohesiveness or communities of interest that are being divided.
Can you put those up for the side of the
So I thought D aligned to the geography much more clearly with the 55 and Newport Boulevard
I agree.
and Harbor. But yeah, it's just more clearly divided. But C, I think Mr. Moser had made a point in previous sessions, like that there about like section 2 having so. Costa Mesa along the Newport Boulevard, it's clear there's a change or a divided interest like the east side and west side, and so that's kind of reflected. But that whole area around Triangle Square, that's a very busy area. It's not just one side, right? There's a lot of businesses, so that is more reflected, I think, in C, kind of that lower part where it crosses over. And I don't know, and that's just my observation that.
That, and work down Plan C, that's what I was trying to go for. The other consideration on section 3 in Plan C is I was trying to keep that area north of Del Bar
Up to
altogether.
the
But I'm not as familiar with that neighborhood. I don't know if anyone is over there and know if that neighborhood makes sense.
In Plan B5 and in Plan C1, it's weird because there's South Coast Metro, there's the fairgrounds, I guess at least in Plan C1, but then there's also a healthy mix of residential, and I don't know that necessarily matters. The airport, again, is not in the district, right?
Right.
Okay, my eyes are playing tricks on me.
I have a comment here. I like Plan B over C just because C breaks up the east side a little bit. But can we put Plan A up for a second? Plan A on the right there, not meaning to defend mine, but what I tried to do was keep neighborhoods together. I had a couple of awkward spots, but first off, see District 4 or Division 4, I tried to keep that Newport Boulevard business district together as part of that. You can see that the west side of Newport's all together in 4. That's why 4 looks a little odd, but the numbers work. The part that I found difficult to make the numbers work, notice 2, which is mainly Mesa Verde area, it jaunts off to the east into Division 1. I didn't like that, but I couldn't quite make the numbers work. But my goal was to keep neighborhoods together and not break up areas with high ethnic populations. So that was my thinking on that one. But if I had to vote on one at the moment, it'd probably be B.
I think the fact too that on both plans B and C, there's 2 proposed districts that are already identical, and I think there seems to be some logic to that. And I know it's a delicate issue about the possibility of creating a minority-majority district, but from the guidance of the lawsuit, the demographer's notes, the district attorney's notes, all things being equal, it seems like a worthwhile venture to try to get, a dense minority-majority district, and both plans B and C achieve that, and in the letter. And then they also group Mesa Verde down into like Fairview Park, which is not perfect, but there does seem to be some continuity and some logic to that. So I definitely like Plan B and C. Not that the other plans that are viable are poorly drawn plans, but there just seems to be a lot to like on both B and C.
Sounds like we're down to B and C.
Unless anybody who actually created a map had any additional info that they want to give to their reasoning behind creating that map, that would help us widen the decision.
Well, I just want to say I understand how Tom drew his map, and I part of me likes the whole keeping the neighborhoods together, but another part of me likes splitting them up. And the reason I say that is because then you have 2 districts with 2 people elected that have skin in the game for the same neighborhood, even though it might be one end of Mesa Del Mar and the other end of Mesa Del Mar, or one end of the east side or the other end of the east side. Because if a decision's going to be made that's going to impact that entire neighborhood, you need 3 electeds to vote on it. And if you have 2 that are fighting for what that particular neighborhood wants, or 3, however it's divided up, they're going to have a better chance of getting, the things the way they think it should be. And if not, then they're going to vote in somebody new, and that's kind of what the whole process is. So I like on B and C that some of the laid out neighborhoods are a little bit chopped for that reason.
I personally like B just because of the symmetry and the more well-defined traditional flows of Newport Boulevard being a delineator. But again, they're both similar, and they both have the lowest percentage spread.
And can anybody answer if the delivery routes will change once this goes in effect, or is it just going to be business as usual for the drivers? It won't affect. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
For the demographer, can you address the sequencing and the current board and their residence, their place of residence, how that would relate to the sequencing? I mean, I don't think we want to take that into account. I'm just kind of wondering how that works if the 2 that are up for election in 2020 are both in the same district as it's voted, or otherwise.
I don't know. I know. I can tell you who's up for election, and so the next is in 2020, and so there's 2. So I'm going to go back to local sequencing. So the 2 are Thurman and Perry. So those 2, if they happen to live in 1 or 2 divisions,
Both live. I know both
They-
very
3 up in 2020, you'd sequence it where the 3 are in there. If whoever those 3 board members would be, even if they were in, if 2 of the 3 or even 3 of the 3 were in the same division, then they would still, in a sense, they could all go up for election, but it would be only for one division. In a sense, when you're looking at a list of board members and looking for who is the representative of Division 1, after the 2020 election, only 2 of your board members will have district numbers next to them. And then after 2022, then you have all 5 having division numbers next to them. Now, if it happened that 4 of the 5 were in, I believe that wouldn't work. So if 3 were in their own divisions, then you could assign them a division only because there's only one person in that division. But if it gets a little sticky when you have 2 or 3 in a single new division. But with the sequencing that we have now in 2020, Berryman and Perry would be up for election in their division that they're assigned to. Now, if or where they live, if they happen to be in the same division, if they want to go up for re-election, they would be going against each other if they were in the same division. If you had, I won't pick on anybody in particular, but if you had somebody that was up for election in 2020 and another person in 2022, but those were in the same division,
That was my question.
whoever goes up first, they become the division election. That person that also resides in the new division is still on the board until 2022. And then they don't have the opportunity to be elected to that division because it's not going to be up until 2024.
Okay, that was my question.
And there's too many sequences and tables that could be to show that. It's really convoluted, especially when you don't have all of those different maps and there's so many permutations. And that happens too with any city council, for example, if Costa Mesa just went to divisions, whoever's the 2 or 3 that are up first, or 4 or 3 are up first, then those would get district numbers or division numbers next to their name. And until you go through 2 sequences of elections, not everybody will have a division or district number next to their name.
Thank you for explaining that. I think that we have a great board, but I don't think where they live should be taken into consideration by anybody in terms of how do we draw the lines to keep the same board. I don't think that should ever be a consideration. That's my 2 cents.
As part of this process, and to play off of one of Sue's questions earlier, do we have the latitude if we were selecting, just for example, if we were choosing between B and C, do we have the latitude to adjust the numbering that are on the maps here? So, for example, have District 1 be on the extreme north end of both maps?
The numbering is arbitrary right now, right?
Right,
Right,
it is.
so we
and
could-
so you could, I would say you make a suggestion, but in the end, there's, in a sense, tweaking that would be done, and you have to decide, the board and staff would decide in the sense, too, of the elections, of how do you want to be able to identify which districts or which divisions are up for election. And so the odds and evens tends to be the easiest way to think about it. For example, the board of supervisors is not that way, and it can be very awkward. So it's just one of those things. So the easiest way to keep it straight in people's minds is odds and evens, and so that becomes arbitrary assigning of the numbers. Obviously, the data underlying it does not change, and the boundaries don't change. It's just the actual assignment of the division numbers. You can make any suggestion that you want. And if you prefer, again, starting at the top is always a good idea from north to south, in my opinion. So, yes.
So in theory, if we knew where board member Perryman board member Berryman and board member Perry lived, we would want to make them 2 and 4, hypothetically speaking, because they're the only 2 up, and then 2 years from now it would be 1, 3, and 5, and number it accordingly. That would probably have the best way of being approved by the board and would make the most sense, I would think.
So, with that information, when the board does make their decision, what ends up happening is all the detailed information for the boundaries that are selected, if the board actually chooses to go to this, which obviously is the idea of this whole process, but then we would work with getting the registrar of voters all the detailed information that they need on all the boundaries and work with staff on the sequencing. So I would say we would collect the input definitely, but I would say don't spend hours and hours thinking about, okay, what's the best sequencing and numbering until you have a final map for it. For discussion, or is there any, with the plans that we have, and I guess I'll just through them again, are there any ideas for, or do you like the plans that you have? Do you see a need or desire to make any revisions to the ones that we have?
I like the numbers of Plan C, and I like how it works out for District 5. But Plan B is prettier in terms of using major streets like Harbor and Newport Boulevard. Could we make minor adjustments to B to get the 5% down a little bit lower, or do you guys think that's insignificant?
I'd just like to jump in. I started with that, and then that's how I got down to 328, was making it uglier. So if we want to keep it like this, and I agree, I think it's much more straightforward. I think the issue is if, like was discussed, if you want to group Triangle Square on both sides of Newport together, if you want to keep it as the natural division because it's a major street, then this one I think would be the map we should go with.
And just for fun, because a committee member did raise it, you will get to do this again after the 2020 December census, because if you do switch to divisions, then it's after every decennial census, about a year later when the data comes out, really what should be done is you assess with the new data what the population is for the district, and then what is that target population, and you do an assessment of the existing direct divisions to see what the population spread is. And so, like we said, if you do have a lot of growth in the city, more housing units going, more population comes in, or people move around, you may not have the same spread. You may be over 10% and be required to adjust the boundaries again. So don't think this is over forever.
Oh.
You're looking at about 3 to 4 years. You're going to be, in a sense, doing this again. So know that the division boundaries aren't final forever.
Makes me feel a little better.
Unlike I understand some other special districts that are out there, but really what should be done is you assess what those with those divisions with the new decennial census data. You look at what the population spread is with those director divisions.
Is it projected that
Microphone.
is it projected that we'd go through this exercise again around 2021 after the consent census, but before the next voting, like 2022?
So what would happen is the redistricting data set comes out. It's supposed to be released by April of 2021, a year after the decennial census. So that happens on April 1st, 2020, every decade. And then the redistricting data set gets released in 2021. For the 2020 election, you don't have to, there's not necessarily a timeline required that you have to evaluate the districts. You don't have a timeline and you have to review it by a certain date. But for it to take effect for the 2022 elections, if you wanted to do that, then it would have to be done by early July of 2022 to take effect for the November election. So you have over a year 18 months, but maybe 15 months or so to complete what would be the process to evaluate the boundaries. You could find that the existing boundaries, if they get adopted, what would be, say, the director division boundaries, those could be under 10% threshold. So you could just leave them as is. Or you could decide, the district could decide to adjust the boundaries. So if it were to be, the boundaries were to be changed to take effect by the 2022 November election, it would have to be completed by early July of 2022. But then, yes, it is once every decade after that. So 2031, Social Security will be out, so I will still be working. Yes.
Sounds like we have a plan B.
It does seem that way. We have another public hearing, right? So we wouldn't necessarily make a final vote tonight if people want to research it more or think about it, but it does seem to be a consensus forming around plan B.
And you also have some committee members that are not here.
You get a trophy, Mike.
But this is very good that you have this discussion. Sometimes you have nobody saying anything, so it's always good.
So what do we do next?
So what I would recommend is, because these maps were only posted last week, we do have a revision to Plan E that will also get posted tomorrow, just in a sense to keep that up there. All the plans will be still posted online for consumption. And what you want to do is you want to see the public digest and take a look at the plans and see if there's any other information that folks want or want to provide comments. We do have a member of the public that hasn't been able to speak on this item yet. But you want to, within the Brown Act, those parameters, so again, not talking amongst yourselves, but think about it over the next month and see if we get any additional public comments. We're not seeing or hearing any revisions necessary, so it's unlikely that we will have any that need new, and we have to have them posted before the next meeting. And then at the next meeting, again, you're going to be asked to make a recommendation to the board on a potential map or maps to consider, and then also the sequencing of election. And if you have any other information that you'd like to provide, for example, the numbering and things like that, then you can also do that as well.
If we wanted to propose revisions to any of these maps, because I really do like B, but again, I like the number. I would like to see a lower percentage, and maybe that's not possible, and that's how she this one, which is C. But if in variance per district, one is 5%, B is 5%, and C is 3.28, I think. So if any of the members decided to go home and monkey with it and then propose a new map, when would they need to have that turned into the clerk?
Well, we would need to create a whole new standardized map and things like that. So we would have to set a deadline to do that. And my guess is, just due to timing and folks being with the holiday coming up in July and people out on vacation, you still want to have people absorbed. We also don't want to have another 10 versions of Plan B because everybody decided to monkey with it.
Right.
So what I would suggest is we can take a look at it right now and see if we can think of something. I did just for backup just because I had a feeling. So we have Plan B. This is the block group boundaries, and so we can look at and see what the spread is. So we want to take a look at the plans, and so if we look at Plan B and look at the divisions in your handout. So right now, Plan B has a spread of 5%, and we're looking at a low. So Division 1 is low, or under the target population by 810 people. And the largest division is Division 4, which has 352 persons above the target population.
Okay.
So
1 is a minus 810 and 4 is a plus.
Yes.
How many?
Correct.
No.
1 is under by 810.
And 4 is
Over by 352. So ideally what you do is you want to take population from 4 and put it in 1. But what you, if you were looking at it,
You don't want to cross harbor.
you're looking for numbers that are going to bring you closer, but when you're looking at the boundaries between 1 and 4,
Doesn't make sense.
you're looking at very high numbers. The only one that could possibly reduce it is moving this one right here in this 498.
Does the community feel that Newport Boulevard as a marker is more important than trying to get under 5% spread? Probably.
I do.
Probably, yeah.
That's a win for me.
Just cleaner.
Yeah, I've been looking at it and trying to tear it apart, and I can't find a way to tear it apart.
And again, it doesn't have to be, because we're not dealing with congressional districts, it doesn't have to be 0. I mean, they have a really, really tight margin. There's a reason why California says under 10. And if you explain it by saying, well, this boundary seems to be a more distinct boundary, or the communities of interest are not broken up by doing that, then you can, that's how you can explain it. Granted, it is higher, but it's still not above 10. It's at 5.
It's less than
middle ground. So, and again, too, if we also look at, we have Plan B here, and just to look at Plan B here, we would be, if we were moving that little area that's down here, it is it's a moderate number. It's only 450. I think it was 458 people. It's in one of the moderate, but not the too higher density of the Hispanic and Latinos. So we can run the numbers right now and see if you'd like. It wouldn't necessarily, it's not one of the two higher groups, so that's a possibility. So if we go back to Plan B and we look at, that is, so block group 6. So if we take Plan B, put it into here and change 69 to 1. So if we look at the CVAP population, 4 is still over 50%.
I think you break up the community of interest in that community right there. I think it looks like it's right around kind of where my part.
So that was modified for the one you just modified for Plan B?
That would be Plan B.
Can I see the
Show us where that.
Yeah,
Show
can
us-
we
show
see
the
on
map.
Can we see on the map?
I want to see the map.
It would be this little area right here, this little,
Is that below Harbor Boulevard?
Basically the triangle of Lions Park.
Yeah, it's Lions Park.
And you're adding that to 1.
So it's where like that civic center is, right?
Right.
And then
Yeah.
there's a part.
A library, maybe?
Yeah, library. They're building a new library, but I think for the residencies, it's like there's apartments between. On Park, right across from like there's like a.
Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
pull up an area code. Is that, would you like to see?
There is a lot of homes. I mean, when it comes to apartments and the home, the way it sounded,
Then across from the park, there's homes.
is it gonna make a difference? Because the routes won't change, it's not really.
Doesn't make a difference in service at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's negligible.
No, I think
It looks
the operation doesn't change a bit. This is more just for getting voters. But this is so clean, I hate to break it up.
I know.
You know, I mean, it's.
This would be modifying Plan B.
If we moved, if you took it 1 on the map, I don't know if you can see what I'm holding up. But see how you've got it going Baker, down Fairview, and over? If you went straight across Baker and added the block groups into here, would that put this in a better position?
So
Or would it
looking
be,
at which plan?
Plan B?
Okay, so for Plan B.
If you can go to the, it might look cleaner on the real, or on this map.
So for Plan B, we don't have the.
Because you're under 810, but if you looked at, if you took a little more, instead of having it drop down at Fairview, right there, and you went straight across.
Baker to the 73.
There's.
Okay.
Let me
okay.
just.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, got it.
Bigger issue is you would be moving population
That's too,
from.
yeah, I can even see from here, it's too many. You go
Well,
way
even
up.
with that, you'd be moving population from 5 to 1, and 5 is only over the target by 170.
Okay.
So
Okay, so that's not an area defined. Define more. Okay.
the block numbers, but
Can you tell us where, I mean, the numbers, like where we're over and under in each group? Like you just,
on the second page, if you look at the mirror page of each of your plans,
oh, it'll show it there.
so each plan, if you open the spread, depending on how you printed it out, it should be a facing page.
On the back. B's on the back.
Oh, it's on, okay, got it. Yeah, all right.
And just make sure you're matching Plan B to Plan B and not.
I think I went around there and I couldn't find anything that was small enough. Balance that out without going over.
Home and do it again, Mike. Forget that trip to Italy. Let's get working on this.
Mike, your map is pretty.
Yeah, that's what's, that's the best part about it, is the straight lines involved.
Very orderly.
It looked better when on the map than somebody can vote for it. It looks like it belongs there.
Yeah.
I don't think the spread is that significant at 5%, you know, because we're looking at.
That 400 is probably about as close as you're gonna find in that area. Everything else is 1,100, 1,500. Get it on the top end up there, and there's the home track.
Right. If the threshold is 10% and B is at 5%, we're negligible with C at under 2% variance.
That little notch on Baker, when you look at the neighborhoods, that part that's in 1 is industrial behind the dealership and so forth, behind the Maserati dealership or Lamborghini dealership.
Baker and College.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem to be as awkward when you think about, aerial view of the actual properties. Doesn't seem to be an odd notch.
So would everyone agree that this map is really as good as we could get it, looking at Plan B version?
Yeah, and I mean, towards your suggestion, or if you suggested that, the only modification could be a small little triangle square area.
Everything else is to put it over.
I'm not really hearing any support for adjusting that.
I have a question about the process. We have one member of the community here, and I don't know what we've had submitted online. I think I heard mention of one online. I know this isn't the city council districts, but what I hope we don't hear is when it shows up on the ballot, where in the heck did this come from? How come I didn't know about this? So how are we letting the community know this process is going on?
All of these are available online currently. This whole packet that you have in front of you.
Well, I understand that, but
I'm sorry.
who's telling anybody to go look online?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, how are people being driven to the site?
We can, I mean, we publicize it on social media, newspapers, best we can.
know there isn't the kind of interest in this as there is in the city council districts.
You could, if you had a bill, you could, like the water does, you know, you could have a water, you don't have a sand bill to send out to people, so it's a little more difficult to get it out there.
So we,
Something else you may or may not want to do, take it with a grain of salt, is call the city of Costa Mesa. They put out, it's called the Costa Mesa Minute, every single day. And a lot of people, like thousands of people, subscribe to it. It's online. I get it every morning. And they just make announcements about things going on in the community. It could be about the fish fry. It could be about graduation. It could be about a holiday. Put your trash cans out later. Really anything community related. If you had any interest in having them make an announcement about this, might be helpful, might go a long way to shutting people up who don't pay attention and just complain, by, you know, pursuing an additional avenue to get the word out there. They can do it on short notice if that's something you're interested in doing. That's the only thing really I can think of that you haven't done. Yeah.
Perhaps we could request that for the Monday preceding our next meeting.
Because I mean, this is important, but I don't think it's something people would. I never went to the Costa Mesa Sanitary District website before going on a little tour. Now, like, I'm super interested, and I think you guys do an incredible job, and I'm very interested. But before that, I never would have gone and looked. I imagine that a lot of people probably feel that way.
I look all the time.
Okay, so are we all saying we like this in terms of section the way it is?
I don't think I changed a thing. I think I let it go as is.
The only thing I would propose is that we make Division 4 1, Division 3 number 2. Well, I'm saying and then if you jogged over to 1 and you made that 3 and you made 5 4 and you made 2 5, then 2 and 4 are where the current board members live. That are going to be up for election. And it goes sort of clockwise.
And just so you know, none of the numbers are going to change until after a map is approved by the board. So there
makes sense.
Be
Okay.
changing any. Because you need to have consistency. So
Okay, fair enough.
folks off of it, we're going to.
Yeah, this isn't a thing we need to deal with right now. Okay.
So what I heard as a recommendation is that we gather further public input. All of us come back at our next meeting prepared to make a recommendation. Okay. Are there any other comments from the public or from anyone else in the group? Mr. Moser?
Chair Carey and members of the committee, my name again is Jim Moser, and I have several comments. You have the two issues but you're asked to consider tonight. One was about the sequencing of the elections, and the second was about the map. Regarding both of those, I totally agree with what I thought I heard Committee Member Lester say earlier. I don't think where the current district directors live should be a consideration at all. You should draw the map the way you want to draw the map. You should number the districts the way you think they should logically be numbered. And you should recommend the first two districts that would be voted on this fall be whatever numbers you want. if it so happens that the two incumbents don't live in one of those districts, they would not be eligible for being elected this fall. That would be the consequence of that. I don't know that that quite coincides with the advice that you got, but that would be my understanding of it. And in the real world, when the matter goes to the board, they're going to adjust the numbers probably to their advantage. But I think you should make the recommendation that you want to make and not be influenced by that at all. And in the same vein, I would make the radical suggestion that if we're thinking about voting procedures, you also make a recommendation that we introduce the idea of term limits for this district. The purpose of the board is to oversee the operation of the district. And I don't think it's really a healthy thing when we have the same people on the board for indefinite terms like 30 years. I very much respect the current incumbents and their interest in the district, but I think it's really healthy for all of us to get new eyes on the board every few years. And I would suggest term limits be added to the idea of districting if you're going to do that. But the whole idea of districting continues to be a little bit alien to me because, as has been pointed out, sewer districts are not a really political thing where people are up in arms about one issue on one place and not in another. It's a very function-oriented thing, and the district-wide elections seem to me more compatible with that because of the community of interest as far as sewers and trash is pretty much the whole community. It's not divided up in these districts. If you have to draw a map, map B is a good map, I think, but no map is going to be perfect, and it's going to have arbitrary things. I don't think the people who live on the north side of Del Mar Street feel any different about sewers or trash than the people who live on the south side of Del Mar Street. So it does not make whole sense to me to draw a line there. And the premise of the thing is to get equal population. It's not equal voters, it's equal population, irrespective of whether they're citizens, voters, or whatever they are, equal number of people. That this seems to be based on somebody's notion that whoever is elected is going to go out of their way to actually represent all those people, not just the ones who vote for them, which is perhaps a little bit naive idea to start with, which makes me again wonder about the need for this. And in addition, I would not agonize over whether it's 5% or 3%, because as some of your members have pointed out, these are 2010 numbers. We don't know that they're the current numbers, and your little tweaks might actually be making the population more uneven instead of less even. We really don't know what the current situation is. And then the final comment I wanted to make, I made to the board at their last regular meeting a week or so ago, is a radically different suggestion, which is that the board considers staying with district-wide elections, but consider a different voting system. And the different voting system I suggested to them is one that has been used in other states. It is currently used in Connecticut, in cities. It's used in Pennsylvania in counties, and it's been court mandated in several states, Alabama, North Carolina, Texas, and Ohio, to solve the voter polarization issue. And this is just a radically simple concept, which is to go to a system which is called limited voting, and the only change would be on the ballot, where you currently see, say, three seats open and a slate of 5 candidates, and it says on it, everybody vote for 3 of them. Instead, it simply says, everybody vote for 1 of them. And it takes a moment to comprehend what the implication of that is. If everybody in the whole district votes for all 3, that means the same group of people can elect all 3 candidates because they can vote for all 3. If you're only allowed to vote for 1 and the 3 top vote getters get a position, then a minority group has a chance to rally behind their 1 candidate, and they will get at least a position on it. As Ms. Lister pointed out, they might get voted down on everything that's on the board, but with this system you have the same problem. And that I may be rebutted by our district council here who's behind you. Maybe this is not legal in California. It certainly works in those other states. It has the advantage that the minority group doesn't have to be concentrated down in that one area of the city. They have the same voting power even if they're spread out through the city. And it has the immense advantage that the district doesn't have to go to the time and expense of redrawing districts every 10 years when you get new population numbers. And in a situation like this where it's not really a politically motivated thing, I think it's really a better solution than the districting. So that would be my recommendation if it's legally possible in California, and I haven't come across anything that says it's not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher.
If I could provide a little bit of information. I think I agree with everything Mr. Moser says. Where we're at today is we're being threatened with a lawsuit that says that if the at-large system is vulnerable, and racial polarization is shown, then they can prevail. He is demanding that we adopt districts. Districts is the simple solution, the one that everyone has used. I did check with the Registrar of Voters to find out about weighted or cumulative voting systems, and their response was that that type of system is not certified for use in California. That's the best I can tell you today. And we wouldn't have time to put this in place. It wouldn't stop the lawsuit. We'd still get sued. We'd have to go through that process. It might be a great idea. If we had that system in place originally, maybe he could not have shown racially polarized voting, or we're in the sights of this lawsuit about the district. This is the response that your big task for.
Thank you, Mr. Burns.
And if I can add to, just again for clarification, when we go look at the sequencing of the elections, as I mentioned regarding, say, the 2022 election, the deadline to establish divisions to be able to be eligible for the November 2018 election is, I believe it's July 4th. It's either July 4th or something like July 6th. So per the 90-day safe harbor process and the fact that you have to have at least 5 public hearings, you will not meet that deadline. And so these division boundaries would not take effect until 2020. That's not an option. So you will not make the 2018 election cycle. The other item was that, again, with that 5 hearings, even though there seemed to be a consensus among the group today, you're still required to have 2 public hearings after you have whatever is the public hearing that you have the first set of maps. So you couldn't just make a recommendation today and say, okay, we're done, we can skip public hearing number 4. You still have to, the district still has to have 2 more. You're still going to come back.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So to clarify, General Counsel Burns, you're saying that the suggested limited voting is not certified. That means it's not allowed or is not a qualified form of voting?
We can't make that happen within the deadline. The Registrar of Voters is not accepting that
Okay.
system. So we can't conduct our own elections. They would have to do that, and they're not accepting that system anywhere in California.
Anywhere in California. Okay, thank you.
That's the limit of my knowledge of it.
And the deadline again is making it before a point to where we would officially be sued, right?
We're trying to stay within the safe harbor so that we limit our damages to $30,000. And if we could show that there's not racially polarized voting, or we could defend it, that would be we'd be giving you different advice. But we believe that they are going to be able to show the elements. The statute was written to set a low bar for prevailing, and we're just trying to do the best we can with what the legislature's given us.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make any comments regarding our agendized items, or item in this case?
I just have a question, and I apologize that I asked a zillion questions, but it's my understanding that we're doing the five districts or divisions, and in order to vote in that division, you have to live in that division. Correct? Okay. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And then in as it relates to term limits, is that something that we would be deciding that has nothing to do with the districting, correct? That's a whole nother, or is it part of this?
It is not part of what's required to do under districting. If you want to take that up as another topic and make a recommendation to the board or have it as a discussion item or bring it up or suggest it, you can do that, but you will not be making any recommendations on that for the districting process.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? No. Okay, hearing none, I'd like to close the public hearing on this topic. Open up the floor to any other comments for non-agendized items for anyone in the group. No. Hearing none, I'll adjourn.
I'm so sorry, you guys, but this is. I wanted to congratulate the Sand District because they were just recently awarded this Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 7th consecutive year in a row by the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States. I think that's kind of a big deal, so I wanted to acknowledge that. You have really good people. The other thing I already spoke to someone about, where on your website your agendas and your minutes from previous meetings aren't all coming together in the same place. They're available on the front page, but if you go through under the board of directors, it takes you down a different rabbit hole. So if people are looking in the wrong place, they're not going to find what they're looking for. And that's it. I won't say anything else the next time. Sorry.
Are there any other comments from anyone else in the group? No? Okay.
So for the next hearing, do we review all of the existing maps with the public? Or are we narrowing it down just to be at this point to discuss with the public? Or how would that work?
I would say, at least for what we were looking at, Plan D would be out because it's over the limit. There's no suggested changes to Plan E as it was submitted. We can remove that, and then the 5 remaining would just be the ones that are viable. I could talk to district staff and see if we wanted to have any more revisions. If somebody just couldn't stand it and needed a revision, I would say contact the staff and we'll see if we can do something. But we didn't have anybody jumping up and down saying we really need to do this. So we would just present a simplified version for next meeting. But again, we would have everything available to be able to look at and go over the maps in general. And especially if the folks that weren't here have any questions too, we want to make sure that those are covered if they didn't either read the minutes or watch the video.
And then for council, kind of furthering Mr. Mosier's point, any of the cities or districts that have been brought into litigation for this as a solution, is there any other legal option that could be suggested that other entities have done aside from redistricting?
I know some have suggested outreach, education, and that triggered a lawsuit.
Sure.
That wasn't the remedy we're looking for.
The redistricting has basically been the...
That's what he wants to do, as the remedy for his lawsuit.
Okay, that was specified.
He's very focused on that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
He'll talk, but nothing else seems to satisfy him in the end.
Okay, thank you
And
for clarifying.
as you know, like Mission Viejo has this really good, very low, it's like 17% evenly spread throughout the city. And it's like they can't draw the map in any way that helps. But still, if you don't go to districts, I will sue you. And it's like, it makes sense.
Sounds like that $30,000 might be important.
Yeah.
Let's cost of living.
What are we really in this for?
He claims he's a true believer. But
Yeah, especially when the check comes.
I just wanted to clarify my question on how we were letting the public know. It wasn't thinking we weren't doing it adequately. It was thinking, is it defendable? That's all.
I think part of the defense would be that Scott and the board's initiation, your committee was created, and I think you've done a fabulous job. I've just sat back and listened to your analysis, and I'm it's really very impressive. Don't rush to judgment. We have one.
Mike, when you close it, I want to say one thing.
Any other comments? I would like to just remind everybody for our next meeting and future meetings, if you know that you're going to be absent, please convey that information as soon as possible so that we can make sure to maintain quorum. Any other comments from the group? No? With that being said, I'll adjourn the meeting at 7:40 p.m.